Rats at chess.com, continuing my video series on the correspondence team match played between my video lessons group and the team CARPE DIEM. This was played on board 115. Our man is HolgerHoppe versus NEJC 13. Rating advantage about mid-1600s to mid-1500s for our team. And let's have a look at these two games. HolgerHoppe wins both, but NEJC 13 should be kicking himself. He could have had a point and a half out of this, and we will see. Okay. English opening, kind of a Benoni reversed. And not much really happens in this game for a while. Both sides are carefully developing their pieces. Black opts to play a very odd move, a5. It seems, positionally, it's designed to restrain b4, but why does white want to play b4? It's a square that's occupied. Better just to develop your pieces, but white doesn't find any way to take advantage of it other than continuing his development. And that's what both sides are doing. Then black opts to give up the bishop pair. And, black does have a hole on e4. The white e-pawn on e3 is weak, but black can't do anything about it. But we'll see what happens here in just a little bit. Now comes b4, which black had prepared for all those moons ago, it seems, with his a5 move. But in reality, development's about even. Look at the back ranks. They match. This is a good way to measure things. Look at the back ranks. See? Kings, rooks, perfect match. Queens are a perfect match. And both sides have developed their three minor pieces. So, game's about even. And gains the tempo on the bishop. Brings the other knight into play, makes sense. An alternative might have been f5 to try to keep that knight in there, really secure, keep that e4 square under firm control forever, but it does weaken e6. And here white is willing to make some trades, and I guess bishop takes is just going to be met by knight takes, and bishop takes will be met by rook takes, and about even. So off come some pieces, and usually when you have minor pieces coming off the board so quick, the winning chances just diminish really rapidly. So from a logical standpoint, this game could be heading for a draw, because for one side to win, the other one's going to have to make a blistering mistake, and that's what's going to happen. Now comes the f5 move I was talking about earlier. Maybe better to have done that with more pieces on the board. But anyway, white tries to undermine that pawn, and the point is white's got a threat, and black can't retake with the pawn because his queen will hang. So black protects his pawn, and here white gets tricky, and he's going to lose a pawn. But it shouldn't be all that critical, as we will see. Okay, there goes the pawn, and more pieces are coming off the board. White gets his rook mobilized, and now theoretically this should be a drawn rook and pawn ending, as long as white is careful. Now white starts mobilizing his king. Now this pawn is kind of stopped in its tracks. So even though black's a pawn ahead, from a logical point, these rook and pawn endings are very, very difficult to win. White's objective should be to get an active rook, and white's going to and keep that passed pawn under wraps. Let's see how it turns out. And as the pawns come off the board, the chances of a draw are increasing. So now black decides he can't keep the pawn on e4, so he's going to pick up the pawn on d5. And now here comes the point, almost there. More pawns are coming off the board. And like I say, logically speaking, this game is probably a draw. Although white gets to have the fun and play it out. Rook b4 is a logical move that seems to either force b5, and then the white king comes into play and starts chasing the rook, and Black, with careful play, black should probably draw. The white gets to have the fun. But instead, what justified logic to me is that black would trade rooks right into a lost king and pawn ending. I looked at his games thinking, this game lasted a while. Maybe this guy is playing like 100 or 200 games. He only has 7 in his history, so I don't know who was taking the time here. I didn't really pay attention. HolgerHoppe has about 24 games. But White's going to trade rooks here and then resign in just 3 moves. So didn't he analyze this position out and see it was lost? Didn't he know that trading rooks into this ending is lost because black has this outside pass pawn? I mean, these are things that every 1,300 player and above should know. Even every 1,000 player and above should know. You trade rooks, you lose because the outside pawn beats you. It deflects your king to keep it under wraps, and the enemy king comes in and chews up all your pawns. So, rook c4 just loses. Rook b4 has a fighting chance. Or maybe rook a4 with the idea of checking and coming behind the pawn. That should be active enough to hold a draw. But anyway, had he analyzed this out, he would have seen he loses. And now he goes after the pawn. But here comes the black king. And at this point, white looked at this and resigned. Because really there's no hope. I'll just show you. You got to get the king back into play. Now you push here. This is threatening to queen, so white needs to take. And the king comes back, and now just simply gobble the pawn, and if king e5, king g4, and the pawn runs. So it's that simple. Anyway, just briefly, instead of, as I was saying again, instead of rook c4, swing the rook over here. Let's get it behind the pawn. Okay, what's black gonna do? Well, let's push the pawn. Okay, and I will give the check, gain a tempo, even though it brings the king up. Now we've got the rook behind the pawn. That's where we want it. Okay, and rook king c6, and suddenly white has a threat. White's threatening to win the rook, so let's give a check. Back the king up. Now how does black make progress here? The king is close enough to hold a lot of things here. This rook can run over here and start menacing pawns. Yeah, let's just go here. Now suddenly white's got a pass pawn ready to run, and you can't push b4 because of rook c8 check. You don't have to play rook h8. You could play rook f8, and now this pawn is just gonna drop, and it should be a simple draw. Anyway, the next game is even more amazing. We'll see when we get there. Let's flip the board and enter the game. Hopefully it loads at the beginning like it's supposed to. Hey, it did. Wow. Okay. Now, white's being a King's Gambit player. I can't believe what white does next. Okay. White takes this pawn, and black now has an immediate forced win. Queen h4 check. Bang. What are you going to do? If you push the pawn, queen takes e4 check, and you win a rook, game over. That leaves one alternative. You move the king up. And, this is all thematic. If the king walks, he gets mated very quickly. You have to give this pawn up just to activate the bishop, but it's still pretty deadly. Black can put a knight on e7, threatening this check. White's not long for this world. But I don't know why black didn't analyze or see this or know this, and why white allowed it. It's a mystery, but now white needs to play knight f3 to stop this nonsense. But nope, he doesn't. And now comes the check. And saves his knight. So black found the check, but he found out a move too late. And now black gets bold and offers a piece. So white protects. And here's a critical stage of the game. The natural thing is if you're making this exchange on e4, you want to take the bishop. But what you'd like to do, if you can, is take that bishop with check. So let's check on f4 first. Okay, now the rules say you have to get a check, right? White has 4 legal moves. He has e2, e1, c3, and d3. Well, first point, if you go to e2 or e1, you pick up this bishop with check. Okay, now do you want to come out to d3 or c3? I don't know. This is getting very risky for the white king. Knight e5 check certainly looks enticing, and a lot of things hold true. If king e2, you're picking up the bishop with check. If king c3, now you just get the bishop, and the white king is pretty much hopelessly exposed. So, the alternative is to come up to c3, and here, see, black's going to give up a piece, but the difference here is that the white king is more exposed here, and white's going to have to play very, very carefully here to avoid a loss. Now, you might say, oh, look, you can get the queens off. Well, that's not true. Or is it? Let's see. Somehow I had in my mind bishop e5 check. Oh, no, let's do this check. Okay. And king b3. Yeah, right. Yeah, king b3. See, it's not true, right? Check. And you've broken the pin. And, how about that move? That looks pretty deadly. White gets to give up his queen. Mercy. Okay, so these are some of the possibilities that exist. So you don't, no hurry to take. You can take the bishop next move. It's not going away. So black took it, but the difference, as I say, is the white king is not as exposed as he was, and now black opts to grab a pawn, but this is going to leave him a piece down, even though he has a lot of pawns for it. White has 4 pawns. Black has 7, but this favors white, and strategically white is winning right now. And the reason white is winning is because those black pawns are not really doing anything. They're not marched up the board where they're threatening to cause white to have to sacrifice a piece to keep one from promoting. Not to mention the fact that the c pawns are doubled. So strategically white is winning now, and he just has to get his army out and get him into play. And black's okay in a way. He's got a nice, a whole lot of pawns, but in the long run he's going to lose those pawns. And white just keeps getting exchanges off the board, or forcing pieces off the board, and now black gets his pawns undoubled, but the black pawns are blockaded. He can't progress with them. And now the king comes into play, and look at those 3 center pawns of blacks. None of them can move. One is illegal to move. The other 2 pawn pushes will cost a pawn. So white is just simply better, even though black has 3 pawns for the piece. It's not enough. And now the white rook's getting active, and white swings the rook over to a4, and at this point black realizes his pawns are going to start falling, so he resigned. He never did get them going anywhere at all, did he? See, if you guard a7, e6 falls, and then soon c6 and d5 will fall, And if you don't guard a7, it's just going to fall, and then you still run into trouble on e6 and c6. Not to mention the fact that white will have a formidable pass pawn on a3 that will probably pretty soon start marching up the board. So with proper play, any JC13 should have clearly won this out of the opening and had good drawing chances in the first game. But chess is a game where you got to pay attention. You got to work hard the whole game. You can't just sit there and relax. Anyway, thank you so much for your time. The score now in the match 291 to 110. There are 19 games left, so maybe in another 2 months the match will be complete or close to it. Thanks everyone so much for your time. Bye now.